Karen has irrationally harmed my disabled son, and I will make her regret her actions. Welcome to Karen Karma. Have you ever encountered an HOA Karen? Share your story in the comments below. I am a single father, living with my son Elliot, a 10-year-old boy with a heart always filled with love. But life has not always been easy for Elliot. When he was just 4 years old, he underwent a dangerous surgery that left him paralyzed from the waist down. But Elliot never let that hold him back. Even though his body couldn't function like other children's, his spirit remained optimistic and joyful. Every morning, I take Elliot outside, and he smiles brightly, eagerly driving his electric wheelchair around the neighborhood, breathing in the fresh air. Elliot always finds joy in the simplest moments, and for me, that is the most precious thing. The neighborhood where my son Elliot and I live, with its clean, paved streets, lush green trees, and charming white houses, is always an ideal place for middle-class families who are seeking peace after a long day of work. Each morning, the warm sunlight filters through the trees, creating a quiet, almost dreamlike atmosphere. The houses with iron gates, hedges, and small, beautiful gardens always make me feel like I am living in a peaceful painting. Everything feels like a perfect picture of life, where everything seems to have its place, and every family finds peace in their home. But in one corner of this neighborhood, there is someone who always looks at us with contempt: Karen, the president of the HOA. At first, I thought she was just the type of person who dislikes noise, because Elliot can't help but make sounds when driving his wheelchair. However, as I observed more, I realized something far worse. She was not bothered by the noise, but by the very existence of my son. Her sharp gaze, the coldness in every word she spoke, the way she looked at Elliot whenever he passed by her house, all of these things filled me with an increasing sense of dread. She didn't just see Elliot as a different child. She saw him as an intolerable nuisance in the ideal space she lived in. Karen was not just a difficult person. She was a nightmare hidden within the peaceful images of this neighborhood, and Elliot was her sole target. Every time Elliot went outside to drive his wheelchair, I could feel the surveillance, the palpable discomfort from her. Complaints sent to the HOA about the noise created by Elliot's wheelchair were no longer surprising. She wrote that Elliot was disturbing the peace and ruining the aesthetic beauty of the neighborhood just because a disabled child needed support to move. But that wasn't all. One time, when Elliot and I were on our way to buy ice cream, Karen was standing at the window, silently watching us. As we passed by her house, I heard a quiet voice, but it was loud enough for me to hear clearly. "We don't want this neighborhood turning into a place with engines running wild." I turned around and caught her icy stare looking at me. At that moment, I felt like I was being violated, as if the peace in this neighborhood was not enough to accommodate a disabled child. But it didn't stop there. Karen didn't just complain about the noises Elliot made. She began to try to make things difficult for my son in ways I didn't expect. One beautiful morning, when Elliot was driving his wheelchair through the community playground to get to the bus stop, Karen suddenly appeared there, hands on her hips, her voice sharp. "This is not a place for motorized vehicles to be running wild. The boy cannot play here anymore." The other kids were standing there, and I saw Elliot looking confused, not understanding what was happening, only turning to look at me as if seeking comfort. I couldn't let my son be driven away so cruelly. But what could I do when she was the president of the HOA? Another time, Elliot and I were sitting on a park bench near our house, enjoying a quiet afternoon. Karen walked by, her gaze stopping immediately on Elliot's wheelchair. She stopped, spoke quietly to one of my neighbors, loud enough for me to hear. "I don't understand why this family doesn't keep the boy inside. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood at all." Those words felt like a knife cutting into my heart. Elliot didn't understand, but I knew very well. She saw my son as an anomaly, as a mistake that needed to be hidden. Karen went even further when she began creating artificial conflict situations to make life difficult for us. One day, I received a notice from the HOA stating that she had reported that Elliot had caused a disturbance when he passed through the sidewalk near her house in his wheelchair. Even though Elliot was just passing by without doing anything wrong, she called me directly and said, "If the boy can't keep quiet, then I will have to ask him to stay away from these areas. This is a residential neighborhood, not a place for wheelchairs to be rolling through." The entire neighborhood knew she was not just bothered by the noise, but by the very presence of Elliot. Every time Elliot went outside, I could feel Karen's piercing stare from her window or her sneaky appearance near my car window. It was a feeling of oppression, a pressure that I couldn't escape from. Her complaints gradually seeped into every corner of the neighborhood, and Elliot, the boy I loved more than anything, was the one who had to endure the baseless hatred from a woman who had no empathy. That feeling was a pain I could never forget, and with each passing day, I knew that I would have to fight to protect the freedom and respect my son deserved. One morning, like any other morning, Elliot, as usual, drove his electric wheelchair past Karen's house on his way to the bus stop. The early sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a soft yellow light on the road, and the boy was still smiling, happy with the moments of freedom his wheelchair provided. I stood by the door, watching him, savoring the peaceful moment with my son, unaware that the worst was yet to come. Suddenly, I heard a call from behind. "How are you, dear? Can I see your new wheelchair?" It was Karen's voice, but this time there was something different. Her question wasn't a genuine concern, but an invitation to some scheme that I couldn't yet predict. Elliot, without suspicion, stopped and looked up at Karen with innocent eyes, as if she were a close friend. "I'm sure I'm fine, Auntie," Elliot replied, his voice pure and naive. The boy still trusted this woman, even though I had long sensed the discomfort she had toward him. Karen smiled insincerely, her smile lacking warmth. She bent down to look closely at the wheelchair, inspecting every detail, and then suddenly reached for the backup battery cord. Elliot didn't notice, as he had no idea what she was planning. In just a brief moment, Karen skillfully detached the battery cord and hid it in her coat pocket without anyone noticing. And so, just a short distance later, the wheelchair suddenly stopped in the middle of the road. Elliot looked at the wheelchair in panic, trying to control it again, but to no avail. The boy pressed the restart button, but the wheelchair still wouldn't move. Fear slowly crept into his mind. Elliot sat there, wide-eyed, hands gripping the handlebars, but unable to move. At that moment, I was sitting in the house, sipping a cup of coffee, looking through the window. The neighborhood was as quiet as ever, with children playing in the yard, and the sound of birds singing cheerfully in the open space. However, just as I turned back and resumed my work, the sudden ringing of the phone startled me. I quickly grabbed the phone, not realizing that this call would be the start of a nightmare. "Dad, my chair won't move. I'm scared. Dad, please help." Elliot's voice came through the phone, but it wasn't the cheerful and innocent voice I was used to hearing. This time, it was full of panic, trembling, and despair. I could hear every gasp of air from the boy, as if he was trying to stay calm but couldn't. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My hand tightened around the phone, and my heart raced as if it had dropped into my stomach. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Elliot, the boy I had always protected and loved, was calling me in panic. The feeling of helplessness and worry surged within me, making it impossible to think clearly. "Where are you, Elliot? Don't worry. Daddy will be there right away. I will be there right away." I tried to keep my voice calm, but inside, I was in total chaos. I looked out the window, as if hoping for some miracle that could prevent me from facing the fear in my son's voice. But there was no miracle, only the truth that my son was in danger, and I had to do something immediately. Without hesitation, I left the coffee cup behind, ran out the door, not even taking the time to put on my shoes, only panic and fear flaring up in my chest. Elliot, I'm coming. I shouted as I rushed to the car, not daring to think about what might happen. My heart was like a boat adrift in the vast ocean, not knowing where it would drift. But I had only one goal. I had to get to my son. I had to save him from fear. I had to do everything I could. The familiar street seemed to stretch on endlessly. I drove as fast as I could, my heart full of fear as I thought about the dangerous situation Elliot was facing. My heart was pounding, praying to get there in time. The image of Elliot, the boy sitting motionless in his wheelchair in the middle of the empty street, was like an unshakable haunting. When I arrived, I saw my son sitting silently, his face tense and confused, and I rushed to him immediately. Elliot looked at me, his eyes filled with worry. Dad, why isn't the chair working? I'm so scared. I checked the wheelchair and immediately realized the backup battery had been disconnected and the chair couldn't operate anymore. It wasn't a technical failure, but the work of a malicious hand that had caused my son to go through this terrifying experience. I asked him if he had met anyone on the road. Elliot nodded and mentioned Karen. My eyes went dark with anger, but I couldn't let fear take over my son. Don't worry, Elliot. Daddy will fix it for you. You're fine. I'm here. I hugged him, trying to comfort him while my heart was seething with anger over what had happened. Later that afternoon, when I was walking around the neighborhood and happened to encounter a neighbor with Karen, she quietly whispered to him, deliberately making sure I could hear. I just disconnected the battery a little, so the boy would know not to keep circling in front of my house. I stood there, stunned, furious, and ashamed. Everything became clear. Karen didn't just want to reduce noise. She saw my son as a nuisance, something she wanted to erase from this neighborhood. The entire neighborhood knew, but no one dared to speak up. The feeling of loneliness and helplessness rose within me, as my child was treated this way for one reason only: his difference. She was the one who had caused such terrifying fear for Elliot, and now she was proud of her actions. The sense of helplessness then turned into an unshakable determination. I couldn't let Karen continue to destroy our lives. I couldn't let her continue using her power to harm the vulnerable. I decided to file a lawsuit. I contacted a lawyer and attached a complaint about Elliot's disability, along with other evidence, including photographs from when Elliot's wheelchair broke down, captured by nearby security cameras, previous complaints from Karen about Elliot's presence, and some recordings I had collected. My lawsuit was quickly brought to court, and the case drew attention because it concerned the rights of people with disabilities, especially children's rights within the community. At that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a personal battle to protect my son, but a fight for fairness and the rights of people with disabilities in general. This realization made me stand firm, even though I knew this fight wouldn't be easy. On the day the trial began, I couldn't contain my emotions. As I walked into the courtroom, it felt as though everything had become so monumental, like my entire life was being judged before justice. Everything, every detail from the incident until now, seemed to converge on this moment. Elliot didn't understand all that was happening, but I knew that this would change everything for us, and especially for my son. Karen appeared in the courtroom, her face as cold as ever, but I could sense the anxiety hidden behind her sharp gaze. She sat at the defense table, holding some papers, her eyes occasionally glancing at me with a look of disdain, but I didn't care anymore. She could no longer destroy our lives. When the trial began, the judge, a stern middle-aged man, spoke. This lawsuit concerns discrimination against a disabled child. The plaintiff, Mr. John Smith, alleges that the defendant, Mrs. Thompson, intentionally caused harm to his son, Elliot, by disconnecting the battery of his wheelchair. Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say? Karen stood up, tightly gripping her papers and facing the judge, her eyes coldly directed at me. She said, "Your Honor, I had no intention of harming the child. I simply wanted to reduce the noise the boy makes every morning. Disconnecting the battery was not a dangerous act. I just wanted the boy to understand that he should not be riding his wheelchair in front of my house." Her voice tried to remain calm, but I could hear the tremor in each word. I couldn't stay silent when I heard her say that. "You say you didn't intend to harm my son?" I stood up, unable to control myself. Elliot had to call me in panic because his wheelchair stopped working in the middle of the street. He wasn't just scared, he was facing danger. What do you think about that feeling from a child? The entire courtroom fell silent. The judge motioned for me to sit down, then turned to Karen and asked, "Mrs. Thompson, do you have a rebuttal?" Karen started. I just wanted the boy to understand that his behavior was inappropriate. I didn't want to harm him." At that moment, my lawyer stood up, holding a recording from a neighbor and said, "Your Honor, here is a recording from one of Mrs. Thompson's neighbors. She clearly stated that she disconnected the wheelchair's battery to make the boy understand not to keep circling in front of my house. This is an intentional attempt to make life difficult for a disabled child, not the excuse she is trying to make." The lawyer played the recording, and Karen's voice rang out clearly. "I just disconnected the battery a little to make the boy know not to keep circling in front of my house." Those words made me unable to restrain myself anymore. I turned to Karen, my voice filled with fury. "You made a disabled child who only needed support the target of your hatred. None of us have the right to harm children." After hearing all the evidence and testimony, the judge declared, "Mrs. Thompson intentionally endangered a disabled child and discriminated against him. She will be prosecuted for endangerment, violation of medical property, and discrimination." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge continued, "Mrs. Thompson will serve 12 months in prison without parole, pay $50,000 in damages, and will be banned from holding any position in the HOA board or any public position for 10 years. Hearing the judge's decision, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though a great burden had been lifted off my shoulders. Although not everything could go back to how it was, at least I had done what needed to be done to protect my son, to show others that justice and courage can still prevail. After the trial, I didn't need Karen to apologize. Whether she regretted it or not, the most important thing to me was that Elliot had been freed from fear. Every morning, when the early sunlight shone, he confidently rolled his wheelchair past Karen's house, no longer worried or fearful like before. Every time I saw Elliot's wheelchair rolling by, I felt a newfound freedom in him. His smile returned, bright and innocent, no longer weighed down by the shadow of fear. We had installed an additional lock on the wheelchair's battery, which kept him from facing any more of Karen's sneaky tricks and haunting actions. Every morning, Elliot confidently pushed his wheelchair down the familiar path, and I could see a noticeable change in his attitude. He no longer trembled when passing Karen's house, and I felt more at ease than ever before. As for Karen, after the trial, she had to face the consequences of her actions. I no longer had to worry about her, because every week, Karen was met with the knocks on her door from probation officers, right on time, not a minute late. She had to live with the consequences of her actions, and the community's boycott made it impossible for her to continue doing the terrible things she did before. This neighborhood, where I had once felt the tension and fear, had now returned to peace. No more cold stares, no more stigma or discrimination. People in the neighborhood started looking at each other with friendly eyes, and I felt that justice had been restored. Elliot could continue his life, happy and free, no longer facing prejudice or mistreatment from anyone. This story isn't just about protecting the rights of a disabled child. It's a lesson in courage, perseverance, and standing up to protect the vulnerable in society. Sometimes, protecting justice isn't just about winning a lawsuit, but about changing the community's awareness so that the weak no longer have to endure cruelty or injustice. Elliot is not only my pride, but also a symbol of disabled children in this world. Children who deserve a life not bound by prejudice or discrimination. What do you think of this story? Have you ever encountered a Karen like this? Leave a comment and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Karen Karma channel.